Dar Chapter 12. The journey begins. Dar awoke as usual just before sunrise. He got up quietly and attached his knife and waist pouch to his belt. He was surprised to find his grandmother's deerskin backpack beside his sleep robe. He lifted it to his shoulders and picked up his own shoulder pouch and spear. Dar could tell Mora was only pretending to sleep. He leaned down and whispered, "Thank you, grandmother." He left the tent without waking his uncle. At the fire pit, a younger boy was making the morning fire. Dar stopped. Perhaps his help was needed. When the boy waved him on, Dar felt a pang of disappointment. He also felt adrift from his secure world. The one he was about to enter was full of worry. How much did he really know about living on his own and keeping himself safe, warm, and fed? He left the camp full of self-doubts. Dar walked to the river and then retraced his steps to the pine forest. The day was cold, and he walked at a rapid pace to build up his body heat. When Dar reached the place where he had met the stranger, he shrugged off his shoulder pouch and Mora's backpack. Inside the pack, he found dried salmon, smoked deer jerky, and freshly washed roots. Mora had also packed her own beaver cape. Dar buried his face in its soft fur. It held his grandmother's scent and made him feel less alone. Dar sat on a sunlit rock and ate some jerky. Then he searched until he found the exact spot where the stranger had pointed to his camp and drawn a map in the dirt. Dar studied the mountains in front of him, picked up his gear, and started walking in the direction of the Twin Peaks. He knew they were not as close as they appeared to be. For the first few days and nights, Dar was overwhelmed with loneliness. He missed the morning reunion of his people around the fire, play hunting with the other children, listening to stories around the hearth at night. Dar was used to the rhythms of his people, and he had never been so aware of himself as a person apart from his clan. It became steadily colder as he walked toward the mountains. Dar kept track of the days by cutting notches on a stick. On the third day, he looked into the pack and knew he was eating Mora's food too quickly. He must save some for emergencies and begin to forage for himself. Late afternoon on the fourth day of his journey, Dar speared an unwary young deer. He took off a hind leg, skinned it, and roasted it over a fire. No meal had ever tasted better. While he gnawed at the bone, Dar looked at the body of the deer and regretted his kill. What could he do with it? The smell of fresh meat would attract wolf, bear, hyena, and lion to his campsite. He couldn't take the time to strip and smoke the deer to make jerky. Dar cooked the remaining 3 legs to eat in the days ahead, then gathered up his belongings. He reluctantly left the deer's carcass behind and walked away in the dusk to make another campsite. That night, Dar's sleep was disturbed by the growls of predators fighting over the abandoned deer. From now on, he must rely on small game that could be eaten in a day or go without meat. When the weather was good, Dar slept on the ground and woke himself several times during the night to feed the fire. He didn't want hungry or curious animals to visit him while he slept. One rainy, windy night, when building a fire was impossible, Dar climbed a tree and slept in a fork of 2 branches. He awakened in the cold morning, cramped but safe. On the evening of the 8th day, Dar was striking his fire rocks together to start his evening fire. He stopped in mid-stroke. After the trade, he would have no way of starting a fire on his trip home. Dar sat very still. Why hadn't he thought this trip through? He could probably get another piece of flint, but a sunstone was difficult to find. All of Dar's doubts returned. For the first time, he admitted to himself he wasn't sure he could find Torig's camp. And if he found it, how would he be treated by the stranger and his clan? The story of his great-uncle's disappearance frightened him. Dar considered going home, but he wanted the spear thrower. With it, he would become a successful hunter, perhaps as good as his uncle, perhaps better. He must continue his journey.